Hi, I'm Dr. Richard Visser, and in this podcast, I will take you on a journey through the wilderness of scientific research and experiential knowledge. Together, we will clear a path to optimizing health, well-being, and longevity. I am a former Minister of Health and Sports with a PhD in medical sciences, a published researcher in the fields of obesity, lifestyle medicine, and longevity. I started my career path over 3 decades ago as a doctor of chiropractic. I'm excited to share my methods, know-how, and experience with you. So please join me on the Visser Podcast. Welcome to episode 14 of the Visser Podcast. How do we put it all together? We're really going to talk about this. I'm going to take 3 episodes and we're going to systematically go over how do you put this in your life. Everything you've learned from the foundation works and really bring it down to bare tacks. Okay, what do you need to do? What do you need to do to gain that advantage in longevity, so lifespan and health span, okay, and well-being as we live. So we're going to have to review the studies, of course, the latest studies, but I'm not going to go in depth because I really want you not to get lost in the intricacies of the hormonal enzyme play, you know, all the triggers and everything. I'm going to have to go a little bit into that, but I'm going to try to avoid it as much as possible and really stay to the basis, what's usable to us and what's easy to understand. So we're going to talk about 3 things today, and then in the next 2 episodes after this, we'll talk about the rest of the things that are critical. We're going to start with the most critical. So 3 things today: V02 Max, strength, muscle mass, and then protein, how that plays in. And that's a little bit of nutrition, but I have to throw it in there because we're talking about protein synthesis and everything that we do. So let's start with V02 Max. V02 Max is basically our cardiorespiratory fitness. How fit are we? And this gets, and I had a review in another episode. We check this by basically putting a mask on and monitoring all, you know, the oxygen, CO2, everything coming in and coming out of your body, and looking at how your body uses that, how efficiently your body uses that, how much production does your body have and output when you do that. So usually it's a treadmill or a bicycle, and they put you on this, they put you to a computer, they have this, and they check all the gases, and as you go to your max heart rate, and they see at what point you stop using oxygen efficiently. So anyway, this is a rating to basically check how fit you are. Now what we've seen in multiple studies, I mean, we're talking hundreds and thousands of people have been studied in this. And what they found is with all-cause mortality, this is, you know, a term we use to determine what kind of effect this has or anything has on our lifespan and longevity. So when we look at all-cause mortality, we say, okay, what comparative to someone that doesn't do this, you know, what's the percentage of death? What's the death rate if someone doesn't do it and if someone does do it? So we have that percentage. So when we look at a V02 Max, if we see top athletes, so the elite level of your age, of course, and your sex, compared to people that have extremely low V02 Max, people that basically don't, you know, haven't put the time in their life to gain cardiovascular fitness, then we see a 80% difference in all-cause mortality, meaning that the likelihood that the people that don't do it are going to die compared to someone that's at the elite level is 80%. That is massive. There is no medication, there is no treatment, there is nothing that compares to this. This is the peak. This is the thing that we can use, bar none, that makes the biggest difference in our health span and lifespan. Okay? So we have to look at this seriously. Now you're saying, okay, I'm not elite level, right? Okay, fine, we're not elite level. But even when they look at people that were below average, let's say comparatively people that are at the bottom end compared to below average people that scored on V02 Max, we saw a 50% increase in all-cause mortality. 50%. Massive still. Okay? So we have to incorporate this in our life. This is a huge hack. It is something that, and we'll talk about how to do this and how to incorporate this further. But first, I want you to get the importance of VO2 max, the importance of cardiovascular fitness. Secondly, strength. Now, a lot of studies have been done about strength. Now, strength is not muscle mass. So you can be strong and not be big. Okay? So people that practice strength, it's a completely different way of exercising, and you don't necessarily have to be big. It's just strong. How, we're looking at 70-year-olds that just have good strength. We know how to train that. Well, strength on the ACM gives you a 50% advantage on people that aren't strong. And strength, really, when you look at strength, it's not, it's more of a function of really functionality. So with strength, we're looking at functionality, okay? And when we see this, a 50% increase, it's amazing. It's basically, par to par with VO2 max if you're moderate. If you're below average. So strength is massive, okay? It's also one of the big ones. The third one that we're looking at, and these are all studies back in this. This is not, just me saying, hey, strength. No, this is longevity studies and vitality studies showing that, the death rate of people that are stronger is much less. And we're looking at 50%, the difference. So, so what do we do? What else is there? Well, the other thing that we're looking at is hypertrophy. So size of muscle, and that's where you get into the gym and like more bodybuilding, high reps. We're looking at building muscle. Now we all know that after 30 or a little bit after 30, you start losing muscle, and you lose it at a rate of 4.7 percentile every decade, which is a lot, and which is very dangerous because really the muscle size is another key factor, and it's different than strength. And so when they test muscle hypertrophy, they really are testing it independent. All these are independently tested from each other. So it's not someone that has high VO2 max that also has strength. No, it's independently tested. So the VO2 max is independently tested, the strength is independently tested, and the hypertrophy is independently tested. So with the hypertrophy, we're looking at when you have more muscle, what happens? One, you have more muscle to be able to basically hold you through the ages, okay, through life. We're going to need muscle for glycogen storage. So glucose, two places, the liver and the muscles is where glucose gets dumped from your blood, okay, and we need muscle. The more muscle we have, the less issues we're going to have with becoming diabetic, with insulin, with all that stuff, all right? So it's massive for that. It's basically your metabolic engine, okay? So it burns more fat than anything else. It is something that's going to keep your organs healthy, your hormones healthy, your brain healthy. You're going to have enough protein to pull from. And so this is key. And we're seeing that it's basically above 20% ACM. So muscle hypertrophy in all-cause mortality, 20% increase. Big numbers. Nothing, let me tell you, nothing else comes close to these numbers. Nothing. So this is where we have to start. This needs to be your first step. Your first step. And let me tell you, the discussion about, oh, well, I'm walking is not enough. Walking is just walking. We need resistance training. Walking is not going to give you anything. Yeah, If you are bedridden, if you are a complete couch potato and you can't even take 2 steps, yes, start with walking. If you're decrepit and old, start with walking, absolutely. But move it in to resistance training as soon as possible at any age, because you're going to need it. Okay? And we know we don't build muscle. After 30, 35, we do not build muscle. We hold what we have and we kind of try to keep as much as we have. So this is some of the things that we need to think about. And so as we age, we're seeing a 4.7% in muscle mass reduction every decade. And then when we hit 70, 75, we all of a sudden have just a free fall of muscle. What does this do? Well, listen, the muscle, the strength, the muscle density, the muscle volume creates bone density. It creates efficiency in the body, metabolic efficiency, how we deal with glucose in our system, everything, our heart health, our brain health, you name it. Key here. So when we start losing this, we start being susceptible to breaking a hip when we fall. There's more falls of people of age than there's heart attacks. And we know that a little less than half of them don't make it a year. You know, after 65, if you have a fall, 40% of people will die within the year. The rest of them live very poorly after that. And when you're down, the muscle mass you lose forever. So these are the things we need to look at. You know, as we age, we need to be able to fall, hold ourselves, pull ourselves back up. We need to be able to, and to be able to do these things, we need to start now. Now, at the age you're now, you need to start. Okay? So resistance training is key. Next, and I think not last, but I think the third part that we need to talk about is protein intake. Because we're talking here building muscle, retaining muscle, it's all protein synthesis. So I wanted to go right into protein. We're going to talk about nutrition later on, but I need to really go into protein because protein is super important. Most of the population has a lack of protein intake. Now, what's the protein intake? I'm going to make it real simple because I can go real complicated with protein intake per kilogram, per per age, per sex, all this stuff. But I'm going to basically try to make it as simple as possible. And a lot of this comes from the work of Don Layman, PhD, who's been studying proteins. He's one of the top guys that of this work. So really, when we're looking at protein intake for women, a minimum of 100 grams a day. Minimum. So don't look at RDA. RDA is way low. It's really doesn't make sense what they put there. Minimum of 100. Minimum. If you're not hitting 100, you're in trouble. You're going to start losing muscle. All right? Period. You're going to start losing. So 100 is the minimum. And then up it. Okay? So men, it's higher than that. And really what we're looking at is, I like looking at 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. I like that range. And it could be a little lower, it could be a little higher. Go all the way up to 2.5, depending if you're an athlete, different rules. Okay, but let's say you're above 30, regular, you're trying to get in shape, you're trying to, have this wellness thing going, and you want to create longevity and a good health span. So this is what you need to be doing. And then the second problem is that when we look at how we eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, most of us, or if you're younger, you're eating more meals. But if we analyze our breakfast, our protein intake is super low. And then if we analyze our dinner, it's super high because that's where we eat the meat, we eat the chicken, whatever, we got the big protein coming in at dinner. So one of the things we've seen in research is that we really need you to move the protein from dinner up to breakfast. So we need to have a more even breakfast to dinner protein ratio or percentage. And then in between, whatever, I don't really care, but the breakfast needs to be high protein. And the reason it needs to be high protein because In the night, when you sleep at night, you're in a catabolic state. Okay, your liver needs protein, and so it's taking it from the muscle. You wake up, you're in a catabolic state. To basically trigger the anabolic state, which is basically buildup of muscle and everything, we need enough protein. If we don't have enough protein, the switch doesn't get turned on. All right, and we stay in this catabolic state until the end of the day, which is not good. We need to trigger it. So the protein intake in the first meal, so let's say breakfast, first meal, because we're going to talk about why we need to do intermittent fasting also, and why that's good for us. So I'm talking first meal. Your first meal of the day needs to be in high protein. Same with at night. If you're plant-based, vegan, whatever, you need to really do the science on it. You need to basically up your protein. You need to supplement with protein, and whey protein is probably the best protein to supplement with, because you are going to be in protein deficit. And I know you're going to say, well, eat beans and I do all that stuff. Well, you're going to need to eat so many calories of beans and everything else to come close to the protein that, the people that are carnivore or are, pesco, vegan or whatever, eat, that it's going to put your calories over the top. So you're going to need to supplement. Okay, and a couple of things. You're going to have to do it smart if you really want to go that route. I'm not saying don't go that route, but if you go that route, do studying, do your work, and make sure that you're getting enough proteins in. That's all I'm going to say right now. We're going to talk more about it. So when we want to signal the body to start, producing muscles or going into anabolic state and really, getting ready to do anything, when we go exercise, we're actually triggering mTOR. Okay, now mTOR has two sides. There are studies on mTOR that say, well, if mTOR is upregulated, then it decreases your life, your longevity. However, we need mTOR to exercise, to build muscle. If mTOR is always low, we're not going to build muscle, right? So we need that balance. So what we're looking at when we look at the science is that we need to be able to cycle the mTOR, okay? And it's to get on, shut off, get on, shut off. So what shuts it on? What turns it on? Well, leucine turns it on. So the amino acid leucine is key. We need that in our food, and we need enough of it, okay? So what are we looking at? 2.5 grams of leucine. We need this. This is the turn on switch. So it doesn't come on gradually. 2.5 grams or higher turns it on. It's like boom, once, and then mTOR is on, and then everything. Another signaling happens with hormones, insulin, growth hormone, or IGF-1. And really with children, insulin is the trigger for mTOR. The other trigger is ATP. So that's what we produce when we exert, when we exercise, when we move. And the last one is stress, and stress from resistance exercise. Okay, so this red one is what signals for mTOR to come on. So we need mTOR when we do resistance training. And then we need it to shut off too at some point. We can't have mTOR, or the problem with mTOR is that if it's on all the time. So we need to switch it on, switch it off. Kind of like, stress in our life. Stress is good if it's short when we're training. If it's too long, it's bad. mTOR is the same way. So that's all you got to remember about that. So we need to basically, to downregulate mTOR, we need to restrict our calories and have time feeding. We'll talk about that in the next one. So when we look at what we looked at, we need to fight the big evil, that's obesity. Obesity is the cause of heart disease, cardiovascular disease, you name it, strokes, cancer, basically everything. And obesity is a pandemic worldwide. So it's something we need to fight. And the fight to obesity is really starting with these principles that we just said. The high protein intake that needs to happen with everybody. The resistance training, the V02 Max, and strength training. Okay? So in putting this together, what does this look like? Because we know in the episodes we showed, we have 9 different types of ways to exercise, from specific exercises to train new movements, so it's more the brain connection and learning a new, like tennis, or learning to windsurf or surf. You need, that kind of, or you're doing MMA. That's a specific training. You have strength training, you have power training, you have hypertrophy training, you have endurance, you have extreme endurance. I mean, it goes on, 9 different ones. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, for health and longevity and lifespan, this is what we're looking at, what we're talking today. So when we take the research, we say, okay, what is the most beneficial? Where do we get the most bang for the buck? It comes down to simple hypertrophy training. Because in hypertrophy training, you will also gain strength. Yes, it's not pure strength training. You don't get as much strength as in pure strength. But remember, the research also showed that a bigger muscle mass is super beneficial for us. Okay, so we need to combine that strength with a bigger muscle mass. So that's hypertrophy training. Okay, that basically tells us how many sets, how many reps, what type of resistance training you need to be doing. Okay, so that sets that up. And then we're looking at V02 Max. Well, how do we increase that VO2 max? How do we go from that base level up to, below average or average? How do we upgrade that? And we can upgrade that. We upgrade that if we're smart, not by going running, not by going sprinting, not by any of that stuff. We regulate that by doing the work. And the work means zone 2 cardio, 30 minutes. And when do we do it? We do it after the resistance training, not before. You might want to get on a treadmill or on a bicycle just to warm up, a couple of minutes. But do not do cardio work before strength. Because in strength work, you're going to need everything. You're going to need your hormones to be top. You're going to need fight or flight, which is a short-term duration push of your hormones and your endorphins. You're going to need all the sugars in your body to get that thing going, to get the max out of the time you're spending. And your duration should be an hour or a little less. So max an hour. Right after that, if you then jump on a treadmill and you do your zone 2, and zone 2 is basically your heart rate as at 60 to 70% of max heart rate. And you can check that out, measure it. And basically it's, you're walking or you're climbing or you're jogging at a pace where you can still talk. It's difficult to talk, but you can still talk. It's not like you're totally out of breath. And you can hold this for a very long period of time. So do that for a minimum of 30 minutes after your workout. So you do that 4 times a week. And then once a week, do the hits, HIIT. Or you do the 4-minute sprint, 3-minute rest, 4-minute full out sprint, 3-minute rest, that thing for a couple of times. And that really boosts, most efficient way and one of the smartest way to boost your VO2 max and get that up to par. And then we have to look at our protein intake and supplement where needed, but make sure that we move the protein to the breakfast side of things and up our protein, because we're all too low on our protein intake. Really, we're too low on our protein intake. And then look at, try to do it with high quality protein. If we're going to supplement, look at whey isolates. These are the best, the most efficient. You don't have to do that much. When you go into the other supplements, you might have to take a lot more to get to the levels that you need to be at. So I think this is really what I wanted to get through in this first part, and really look at, okay, how do we put this together? So what this looks like is this. You're training 4 times a week, resistance training for 1 hour. And it's hypertrophy training, okay? Then followed by 30 minutes of cardio, steady state zone 2 cardio. And then once a week, you're hitting the hits or 4-minute sprints, 3, 4, whatever rest you need to get your heart rate all the way down, and then 4-minute sprints, and then 4-minute sprints, and then, and start with 3, work it up to 6. So then we're creating a basis. Okay? So I'm trying to make this very easy. I'm not going, I'll link all the studies, you can look them up, that we're talking about in the description below. And the next 2 episodes will continue on this, but these are the biggest ones. This is where you need to start. Thank you for joining me. Subscribe, ring the bell notification, join me on this journey, and until next time.